Okay, here's the background all filled in, and I'm mixing a color that's just a little bit darker than the background so that I can rough in my composition and make changes easily, because it's not dramatically different if I want to wipe this off and my sketch and change it. It's easy to do. So first thing I think about is how much water, how much ocean, how much sky. In this situation, I really want to zoom in on the wave and focus on the wave. The sky is going to be way secondary, and will be just a smaller portion of the canvas. I use my brush to measure down. Once I decide about how much sky, how much water I want, I can put a little mark, and I'm resting my pinky there, and I can make another mark here, another mark there, another mark there. So this allows me to get a pretty straight horizon line right from the start. There we go. Then I'm going to have some land sloping down here. Here's the way Wailea Point looks. Got land coming down, a beautiful twisted tree out on the point here, and some tall coconut trees here, a whole little stand of coconut trees. Now I'm going to wipe this out a little bit, lower the land just a little bit here. And see, that was pretty easy to do. Here's also the rock formations that are along here, and the rocks that stick out into the ocean here. Now in the background, I'm also going to put a distant island, the island of Kaho'olawe. Maybe about like that. And then there's the island of Molokini, which some of you may have heard of. It's a little crescent-shaped cinder cone out in the ocean here, about halfway from Maui out to Kaho'olawe. And here's the shape of that little island. There. The next part of this will be to figure exactly what I want for, do I want any beach in foreground here, shallow water, and the wave, and where I'm going to have the focal point of the crashing wave. So there are going to be waves breaking out here on the point and along here. And this will be the foam from the wave. I'm going to have it really peaking up. I want it off center a little bit, so it's either the wave's going to peak here or a little bit off center over there, which I think I'm going to have it peak right about here. This will be the high point of the wave, right where it's crashing. Let me zoom in on this so you can watch the painting happen more from here on in. Okay. So, again, the peak of the wave as it's climbing and getting a little steeper here. This is same as I do in my little wave tutorials on drawing with graphite. I have a wave. Here's the barrel of the wave right in here. See these few lines? These really create the shape of the wave. Here they're coming up, just straight up and down. Here the wave's not quite as steep, so the line is not falling over yet. The wave is laying back down, a little bit less steep here. And then here's the peak of the wave breaking up and starting to fall over. And here's the crashing side of the wave that's cascading over and falling until the foam starts showing up and splashing up. We even have some of the foam come way up here. Often the foam splashes up higher than the peak of the wave here. Here's the bottom of the wave. This might be a smaller preceding wave that's got some foam just coming up on the beach here. These lines are pretty horizontal here. Unless you're looking down on the wave from up on a bluff or something, the lines, the foam laying on the water is kind of little horizontal lines more than circular or very curved. Okay, there's also another wave coming in behind that one, and watch how I can sketch that in here. That will also have these little curved lines like this, but it won't be quite as, it'll be much smaller and not so steep. It won't have these steep lines like that. By the way, here's the wave kind of inside the barrel of the wave right there. Okay, and the rest of that wave coming in. Over here we might have some water splashing up on the cliffs. I'm using some really nice deep violet over in here for the rock formations. So again, I'm just kind of step by step, I'm deepening the shadows and kind of creating some depth to the painting by having more contrast. Up in the foreground, most of the contrast will be right in here. As it gets further and further away, these will be really soft lines that will, not just lines, but softer colors that will make it look far away. You'll see how we'll do that shortly. We've got some slopes of the land here and some cliffs along here. So these vertical lines will kind of give you a feeling that there are cliffs over there. There's some more over here. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm going to step back and look at my composition and think about what else I might want to do, and if I've laid it out the way I'd like it. I can also check my horizon line. There's kind of running my finger right along resting on the top and holding my brush stiffly there so I can run right across the background and kind of confirm where my horizon's going to be. Okay, all right, that's a good start there. Now I'm going to take a moment here and look from a distance I really like the composition now. I like the feel of it, and don't see anything at this point I need to change. It's always good to take a break and step way back from your canvas to make sure you've got the composition laid out the way you want it. It's easy to make the changes right now. Later in the canvas, later in the painting, you know, it's much more difficult to change once you're putting thicker paint on. So my next part of this, typically I paint from the background moving to the foreground. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of golden light to have just a almost monochromatic golden yellow sky. It's kind of rare for me. Usually I'm into all kinds of color in the sky, but I want that to really recede, and I want it to look like a late afternoon, hot, blazing sunshine out in the distance. So I'm going to mix a nice color. Actually, I showed you my palette, and much of those, most of the colors are already mixed. So here we go. See, I'm going to choose some of these warm yellows. That means a yellow with a little bit of going toward the orange direction, rather than a yellow like this. It's a cool yellow that moves in the direction of a green, almost like a green yellow. This is an orangish yellow. So here we go. I'm just going to rough this in real quickly. Now, because the background's still wet, I'll probably end up going over this again later, because it's sort of mixing with the background, which is okay. That's part of how I'm going to keep a harmonious feel about the canvas. I'm going to let this undercoating shine through in many parts of the canvas. So here I'm just keeping my brush dancing on the canvas without trying to fill in everything. I'm going to let some of the background shine through. Oh, there we go. My shirt just fell into my palette. So I was thinking I'm usually really clean with my painting, so I wore a nice shirt, but apparently I got to tuck it in so my shirt doesn't drag into my palette again. Okay. One thing I'm trying to do in this painting, my intention is to keep it really loose and not get too stuck on all the smaller details, and just keep it pretty fluid, loosely painted. I'll get kind of creative with some of the colors, like in the shadows on the waves and in the shadows on the foam. Here we go. That's a good enough start for the background of the sky to begin with. It's always good to come down a little further than you know you want, if you don't want to have to come back later and try and mix a color. And for example, if I put the land in down here and left a space between the two, then I'd have to possibly come back and fill in that void with the sky color again. So I'm putting it down a little lower right now, so I don't have to come back and do that. Great. Now some of that color is going to come right over here and just shimmer off the ocean. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that light. It's even stronger, more intensely white coming across here. I'm imagining my sun is kind of right overhead, not right bullseye on the canvas, but maybe off center a little bit here. And so that light will be reflecting off the ocean out here and become less and less and less glistening light as I get further away from the light source. So here's another way I can make this really feel like the light source here, is to make it even more light in this one area. I can also put my little brush strokes as little dabs of light and color that are sort of radiating out from this central point here. So the light, the dabs of light will come out like so. It's almost as if I'm drawing the little lines radiating from this central point, but I'm doing it with dots. It's just one way to do it. All right, great. A little more sunlight on the water out here. I'm going to mix up a really delicious, but very muted color for the distant island. I'm going to take some of this light violet, some of my pale down cadmium orange, and let's have a look and see how that looks. Maybe a little more of this purple, pale purple color. I like the purple in there. So there we go. I'm running my brush strokes to come down the slopes of the land and then off the cliffs like that. So watch how I do that. I'm mixing the colors. I made it much more purple and a little bit more of this darker violet for the cliff area here. So again, vertical strokes or slopings, steeply sloping lines in here will give the impression that we've got some distant cliffs off on the island here. The cliffs, the land coming down, and see how it zigzags here? Here's a little valley coming down the mountainside here. In other words, there's maybe a riverbed or a canyon created by the water runoff. It comes down the slope and goes along, maybe off another little cliff here, coming down, dropping off the cliff. I'm carefully keeping this loose, that edge. I'm not trying to get a really sharp edge, a little bit sharp here, but I'm trying to keep this kind of a soft-edged slope of the land so that it feels far away by keeping that line, the separation between the land and the sky, sort of vague and not very sharp. It creates a feeling of depth there. Now, just for the fun of it too, I'm just grabbing a little bit of pink, this really light pink here, and mixing it into that color, a little more of that orange, and can have some light kind of shining on the land here a little bit, dropping off the cliffs here and there. All right. When we step forward into the next island, the little island of Molokini, I want to separate this distant island from this one that's only half the distance away from the viewer. So in this case, it's not as pale and faded through the atmosphere. So here goes the little island of Molokini. And I want it to stand out, but I don't want it to be as deep or dark of tone or color as I'll do in the middle ground here or near the foreground. Alright, now while my paintbrush has less pure paint on there and less volume of paint, now I can add a few little highlights here without pushing too hard. Just a little bit of paint will come out of there and make a little more definition for the little valleys and rivers that run down the slopes of the island. Okay, I'm going to step back again, or maybe a little bit more sunlight shining off the land here, a little more of that pink and magenta and white. Here we go. I'm going to step back and have a look again. All right, it's getting some nice depth in it right now. If I want to, I can also put in just a little bit more yellow, there we go, a little more yellow into that. It's going to give it a little more life and keep it really warm feeling. There we go. So I'm just kind of laying some of this color over what's already there, mixing it in as I paint. And there we go. Softening the edges here, a little too sharp. So I'm kind of just touching with my brush without too much paint on it. I'm just touching the space between the land and the sky and let some of that blending occur. And that makes it much softer looking and distant. All right, I'm going to step back again. All right, great. I'm going to use some of that color that I used in the sky. Whatever we have up above reflects on the water quite a bit. And it also, under certain circumstances, like where the waves are curved, they're reflecting what's going on up overhead. So there might be, and also they'd be in the shadow some, so this might be quite a bit darker here. There'd be another wave coming in here on the point, like that. I might even pick up a tiny bit of this pale green for like the wave that's standing up tall where the light's beaming right through it, through the transparent wave, and a nice bit of color that's really going to stand out and contrast the rest of the colors that I'm using in the distance. So that's the first bit of that color that will bring it into the foreground a bit more. Okay, some of that same color will also be in this next wave, just a little bit here. This wave will probably be maybe breaking against the cliffs over in here. So I'm going to have that kind of climbing, meaning going a little bit higher than horizontal. Climbing up, it's going to break against there. There are going to be some beautiful splashing foam against the cliff. And There we go. The next step of the wave also, well, I have the same color on my brush. I'm just using it. So there's some of that nice transparent pale greenish blue that's right in here in the wave. This is the light coming through the wave. Now the nice thing is everything's still nice and wet because of these open acrylics. The paints don't dry that quickly. So I can do some nice blending here. Here the light's coming through the wave down below that point. I'm mixing a little violet in with that green, a little purple in there. It's going to darken this here. So really what I have now are two bands of color. I have the transparent band and this darker band beneath it. So watch what I do. I mean, this is basic blending. I just kind of dance right along the edge of the two colors, very lightly touching one and the other, and it creates a nice blend between the two, so it's not an abrupt change from the light, the sunlit translucent wave down to the wave that's more opaque. Again, I'm putting some more deeper purple in there. I'm also putting in a little bit more of this beautiful aqua blue-green color, and kind of darkening it even more down below like this. So now I'm creating a third band of color. This would be the same way I would do it in the sky. If I wanted to have a blend of color in the sky, I would do just what I'm doing here, but with whatever colors I'm working with in the sky. I'd create a band of color at a time. And here's the wave standing up tall, and then it starts falling over. So look how carefully and gracefully I try and put the lines of the wave crashing over, going horizontally and then dropping over like that. A nice even curve. And here again, I'm going to just dance right along the edge of the darker lower part of the wave and the middle part of the wave. See, back and forth, just touching up into the lighter color with the darker color, and then going back down. When I have lighter paint on my brush now, I'll go back down into the darker area, right along that transition line between one color and the other, or one tone. All right, I'm going to step back again. Now pretty soon this beautiful golden light from the sun is going to start hitting the foreground water out in front of the wave, and I'm thinking it might be about this far out. If this is the bottom of the wave and the sun is just a little bit above the top of my canvas, then the shadow cast in front of the wave might come out about this far. Like if I were to draw a line from that light over the top of the wave, the shadow might come out that far, and then this would be glistening sunlight below that. Okay, I'm going to also do a little bit deeper purple here and green to deepen this even more. Right in here in front of the wave. Get some really nice contrast in there. I have this cobalt turquoise too, which is a lovely paint that I'm going to put some more of that it's kind of a transparent paint, so it doesn't affect it as much as you might think at first. It kind of blends in really easily. Putting in some more of that, the deeper violet, just to darken that a little bit more. This is the shadowed area. My brush strokes become really horizontal along here because we're no longer on the face of the wave where the wave is standing up. This part of the wave is also in shadow here, coming down. That's in the shadow. There may be glistening light along the top of the wave and through the foam, but down here, it's not happening. That's in the shadow. A bit darker. A little bit darker in the foreground here. Foreground of the wave, in front of the wave. A little more of that cobalt, turquoise, and some more of that violet. Really getting dark in here, the dark shadow just before the wave. And I'm also going to use some of that, the purple and that violet, to start laying out the where the boulders are, half submerged, and where the waves are breaking on them. They're also along the slope here of the land. The cliffs drop down. In reality, there are some buildings up here, but I'm leaving them out on Wailea Point. And then I'm going to look at the sunlight and shadows again along here. Watch this. There's bushes and grasses and everything along here. Beautiful sunshine on it. I'm just playing with a little more color up in here too. There we go. Also the tree out on the point here, I like to make it kind of weeping or draping down, a bit like a weeping willow tree or something. I just think it looks more graceful than kind of a stiff shape there. So there's part of the tree, the crown of the foliage. Here would be some of the foliage on the coconut trees that are along here. Might be a few more coconut trees that are down lower, like over the ridge. So I have them sticking up a little bit there. Along the top edge of the tree here, there's some beautiful sunlight on it. So I've taken some of this pre-mixed, really pale yellow-green to have some sunshine on that. Sunshine on the cliff here, the grass part, the foliage. Even a little sunshine on the coconut palm fronds there. Oops, I just made a little bit of a mistake. I wanted to put the splashing wave coming up here, so I'm going to scoop some of that paint off. I just put on here this green. Just using another brush and just pushing hard and lifting the paint off. And then this is going to be just beautifully illuminated foam splashing up from this wave. And trying to keep it in the sort of golden realm so that it looks like the golden sunlight on the foam here. Then I can sort of take a blue violet and create some mist here, as if the wave broke and left in its wake some misty mist in the wake of the foam here and the wave breaking. Okay. Okay, off in the distance, I'm going to drag some more sunlight across the horizontal ocean out here. Probably my most dazzling light will be, I'm imagining the sun to be about here, so this will be really the more vivid, or I should say the lightest colors, the pale golden yellow hair. And see how I'm making little, I keep rolling my brush, turning it to dump off more paint. Turning it, dumping off more paint, dragging it along. Then there might be an area where there's a little bit less sunlight, and then another more vivid band of sunlit water here, glistening light on the water. Now I'm going to step back and see this from a distance as soon as I'm done with these last few strokes here. Sunlight, golden sunlight here. Rolling my brush to dump the paint off. Rolling the brush. Now let me step back and look. All right, it's starting to come to life. I'm getting some really, a little bit stronger yellows in here too, to really give the sense. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that's a really warm yellow that I'm going to have some dabs of that color that really make it feel warm and sunlit on the surface of the ocean there. Yeah, that really makes a difference. Turning the brush, rolling it, dragging, dropping paint along the way. I've got less and less paint, so where will I put it? In the furthest out areas away from the sunlight, I don't mind if I have just some pale, less intense glare on the water. As I get back to the center, beneath the sun, I'm going to get fresh paint, and I want this really strong contrast. It's really bright, brilliant, golden light right beneath the sun. Same thing over here. We've got a little bit of sunlight on the water here. We've got some sunlight along here. This wants to be pretty strong golden light in here too. Even a tiny bit along the top of the wave here. To create the illusion that this is foam splashing up here, and that the splashing foam is actually darker because the sunlight doesn't come through all of it. The edges of it will be lit up beautifully with sunlight, and the middle of the foam, the middle of the crashing wave, would actually be, I'm going to make it kind of a darker violet color here, like this, where the foam is thick enough that the sunlight's not penetrating it. So watch how I do that. There's the darker part of the foam, and actually all along the ridge of the wave too might have. Here's the wave just breaking out here. Along the ridge of that wave, it's kind of dark, and then the sunlight just comes beaming through the wave here. I'm going to let this come all the way up against the island a little bit. big splashing wave here. Same sort of things going on over here a little bit too. I'm scooping up some of this golden yellow too to let it even have more warm sunlight coming through the wave and through the foam. Okay, I'm going to step back and look at that again. I don't sit when I paint. I prefer to walk around and be able to look from a distance frequently, and I do that all the time. I'm always pacing around and probably walk several miles during the course of a painting, just especially outdoors on the beach or something. So here I'm taking some of the darker violet to create foam in the shadow here. Instead of having it pale white or yellow, I'm using some of this periwinkle blue. It's kind of a light ultramarine blue and a light violet, and kind of create the feeling of the shadowed part of the foam, the foamy wave. And the way I'm also doing this, I'm always thinking in terms of three-dimensionality. Here's one, the wave's coming down, it starts to splash. We get some beautiful light on the foam here. And then the next part of the splashing wave would come even higher. I'm putting some pink and yellow into this, and lots of white, to let the light kind of beam through this foam. And all the while I'm thinking about where would the foam be hit by sunlight. So it might be hit by the sunlight right here. It's splashing up enough to be in the sunlight. It also would be happening along here, possibly a little bit like that. I'm imagining these as clusters of foam or shapes, almost like clouds, the way I might paint clouds. Okay, then I'm going to go back into the foam in here. See, I put in those little splashes of darker shades of foam, and then I'm just kind of working out from that, just dabbing out with brush strokes that are wanting to create the feeling of splashing, moving foam. Now, whatever happens in front here, too, we get to have some shimmering reflections with these, putting these vertical streaks on the water right in front of the darker foam here. I put those vertical streaks there, dragging the dark foam color straight down below it. And then the next step is to take a smaller brush and put some horizontal lines, which could be the foam laying on the water, but watch how it breaks up those vertical lines I just put on there, and it creates a feeling of a different surface. Foam, flat water here, maybe foam on the flat water, and then it'll come out into this area where I start having that beautiful, strong, glistening sunlight again. Every brush stroke I'm thinking about where is the sun and how would it reflect off the water. If the sun's right here, directly below it, the lines can be really horizontal. But for there to be a glistening light coming off the water here and coming to my eye, The only way that happens is if there's a little scallop, a little curve to the water there, a little tiny wavelet that stands up and makes a little surface where the sun's going to go bing off there to my eye, or to your eye as the viewer. So I'm always thinking about and paying attention to little details like that that make the painting have more depth and got some of this beautiful pink that I've already mixed that is a delicious color for adding into the sunlight, reflecting off the water. Turning my brush, rolling off the paint, working my way away from the really bright area with brush strokes that are less and less pure in the pigment they're holding, less quantity of paint on there, so it's not as dazzling or bright of sunlight getting further away from the sun. Okay, we got beautiful shadows again right in front of, like this part here, I'm going to have, this is going to be the foam spilling over. Now see what I'm doing here too, I'm choosing some colors that are going to be cool against, as a contrast. Cool meaning like violet, blues and violets in the foam here will really make it feel cool and it'll feel like it's out of the sun. It's not out in the sunshine, it's in the shadow. So that's one of the little tips that I like to keep in mind. Use some cool colors in the shadow and warmer colors like I've done in the sunlit area. So right along the edge of that cool foam, I've got some of this beautiful blue here, this blue-violet, super light ultramarine blue, basically. And then the beautiful, pure, golden yellow sunlight hitting that foam again. Now, how would I make the foam going up into the shadow? Same thing I did here. I'm going to grab some of this violet and blue violet. And this is going to be some of the foam on the water that's going up into the shadow area. The shadow cast by the crashing wave. Also, if I want to make foam on the surface of the wave as it climbs up the face of the wave here, so watch what I'm doing here. I'm using some of that blue-violet to have some cool but rather dark foam. The sun comes right through the water, but it doesn't come through the foam the same way. So, there we go. These little lines will kind of give the impression that there's foam on the water, it's kind of light, but as it goes up in front of the sunshine here, or in front of the translucent wave, the light won't go through it so much. And so it looks dark, almost like a stained glass window. Lines become really horizontal across here on the surface with a little scalloping action here like this. You kind of little tiny cups reflecting this the light overhead. It would be a darker sky right overhead. So remember what we did here with the reflections in front of the foam here. Same thing goes on here. Vertical streaks, reflections on the surface of the water right in front of these waves that are the foam of the waves here. Vertical streaks. I'm putting a little turquoise in here too. And in front of that turquoise spot, I'll have a turquoise reflection, sort of, a little bit. In general, the reflections aren't as clear or as strong a color as whatever color is being reflected. Kind of a rule of thumb in the world, generally so. It's a little bit darker. So now back to a few horizontal lines to break up those reflections. Now I'm going to get back to the very edge of the wave here where the sun is just glistening on it. I got some of this blue-violet and some of the pale yellow. Way too much peach color left here, so I'm going to just get rid of some more of that here with a bigger brush here. Some of that pale aqua, blue, green, and violet. Some nice horizontal bold lines to kind of cover up some of that peach color. Okay, I'm going to step back again. All right, so one thing I noticed when I step back, these are too uniform, the areas of foam on the water, so I gotta change that some. So here's the transparent wave part. I'm gonna go right over that one. Cover that up. If I had stepped back while I was starting to lay out these lines, I would have probably noticed that, or if I had looked at it more closely. So there, that's looking better. It's not quite so uniform now. Stepping back. Okay. So one thing that happens right in front of this beautiful beaming wave, so the brightest part, the transparent part of the wave, is right up near the top where the wave is its thinnest, getting ready to crash there. So some of that reflects right in front of the wave here. So watch these little reflections I'm putting on the surface of the wave. I keep rolling my brush, turning my brush, a little more paint will come off. Turning my brush while I'm making that nice, even, smooth, curved line. All right, along the top of the wave again, the blue and violet to really separate the lip of the wave from the transparent part of the wave here. I'm going to even get a little bit more golden light to mix in with some of this greenish color. Here we go. That's pretty nice. Beautiful golden light coming through the wave there. I'm going to step back and look at that. Okay. Same thing happens on this wave here while it's breaking. Got some of that beautiful transparent wave there and here. A little bit of that beautiful color over in here too. Notice how my lines all follow the face of the wave. These little lines I'm putting on, they're all following that curve that you can see in the foam. Those lines are just curving with the face of the wave there. You can work really carefully and get rid of all these lines if you want to by doing real careful blending, but I actually like them there. It gives the painting more motion. And it shapes the wave beautifully. There's a really nice purple here that just came out of my brush, that where the foam's really dark here, as it comes down onto this part of the wave, I'm going to make some of that purplish foam show up in here a bit. Now to give this some more light on the distant island out there, I'm going to take some of this really pale orange and maybe a tiny bit of this pink, mix them together and have the sunlit edge of that distant little island of Molokini showing up. I want that to be even brighter. I'm going to use some more stronger pink and stronger orange there. Now some of my really pale orangey pale color I want along this edge of the distant land. So let's see. Again, I'm rolling my paintbrush to dump the paint off. Might be places where the sunlight is coming over the cliffs, like here might be some more land coming down and dropping off a cliff here. And that little touch of sunlight on there will give it another bit of dimension. Land coming down, cliff here. Rolling my brush, dumping the paint off. I'm also pushing harder as I run out of paint, not just rolling my brush, but I'm pressing my brush down a little bit harder. Okay, I'm going to step back. That's getting a lot closer. So, a couple more things I haven't even touched on. I'm getting one of my small brushes, which I don't like to use them that much in a painting, but I'm using some dark magenta, and I'm going to put some of the twisted trunk of this Kiawe tree. It's like a type of acacia tree that has a beautiful shape to it here. Okay, and then these coconut trunks, starting with some deeper color up here in the shadow up underneath, and then I'll roll my little brush here, just kind of create some trunks of the coconut trees. I also sometimes will just go along and just do little dots like that actually make it look a bit like the horizontal lines on the stripes on the coconut trunk. Okay. Got sort of a lot of the peach color undercoating shining through a little more than I want. So I'm going to go on with covering some of that here on the slope here, on the cliffs here. There's also parts of that are in the shadow like that. Making a shadowed part will make the sunlight show up even more. Same with the palm fronds. Same with this Kiawe tree. Okay. Some of that, the dark of the cliffs and the trees reflect across the water surface a little bit here too. If I want to make the water look kind of reflective and somewhat smooth. There's even some of that, whatever's going on right up here would be possibly reflecting right across the surface of the water right below it. Same thing here, reflections in here. Those same reflections might happen all the way down here. Here I'm just kind of playing with a little more life and color. I don't want it to be too boring looking and some little dabs of that beautiful pink. Here, and some more dabs of that beautiful golden sunlight on the waves here, the glistening, shimmering light on the water. still doing those brush strokes that I mentioned earlier. Sunlight coming down, it reflects here only off of these little wavelets that are tipped up. And way off on this side, it's just the opposite. The waves that are tipped the opposite wave, the opposite direction, are the ones that catch and glint the light off to our eyes, reflect the light to our eyes. Only if they're curved a certain way. Now, one thing I'm going to do that's going to give this a little more depth is to scoop up some of this deep purple and maybe some magenta, a little bit of this dark green, and create my darkest rock formations here that, because they're so dark, it makes the light on the water and stand out even more and look even brighter and lighter. Shadows on the slopes here a little bit, shadows coming down the hillside here, down the cliffs. And one more thing that I love to do, right in front of those rock formations, I'm mixing a little green into this violet and toning it down a little so it's not quite so dark. But what about some little reflections here? That dark area is reflected on the water in front of it. Dark rocks, reflections in the water. Same thing happens over here. A little bit here in front of these waves too. The reflections right there in front of the rocks. You get just the opposite too with where the sunlight and foam is. Here's the foam splashing up. So you also get that reflected in front of it. Same here, foam and its reflection. So there's a little, rather deep shadow that happens right in front of the foam here. Here's the foam skimming in over the water here. And there might be a little bit of a darker shadow right where that foam meets the horizontal, the flat water in front of it. Same thing in front of the wave here. I'm putting a little bit of a darker shadow right at the edge of the foam. If you look at waves, you'll notice it happens that way a lot. All right, I'm going to step back. We're getting pretty close to finished here. Yeah, I might just leave it like that, and and move in a little closer. All right, it's pretty close. Okay, I see something I want to do still, which is a little more sunlight on the crashing wave. So some more of this dazzling light right here, right at the edge of the foam, where the foam is starting to break up, and where that foam's coming down the face of the wave a little bit there, or coming down the crashing part of the wave. And then there would be some of that beautiful light right on the top of the wave right here. Also, that light would continue right across the very top of the wave here, intermittently, only where the shape is right to reflect it to the viewer. There we go, there's those curved little shapes that might catch the sunlight and reflect it to us. Okay, at this point, I'll get some of my purest, cleanest paint, the brightest golden paint that I have. Lots of titanium white and just a little bit of, tiny bit of yellow. And try and lay that on the ocean way out here to make it look like little dots of glare on the water out there. You can hear the minor birds singing up on the roof. Okay, we're pretty close. Oh yeah, way in the foreground here too. Just a little bit of this pure golden yellow. Make it really look like strong sunlight. So I'm turning my brush again, dumping off little bits of that paint. A little bit more shiny in the foreground here, in front of the wave. Little bits of this beautiful pink too. It's just that contrast. When you look into this dazzling sunlight, you can see all the little different colors of the rainbow kind of reflected back at you. Little tiny bits of all the colors in the rainbow. Turning my paintbrush, dumping off some of that reflected light. It's coming through the wave and bouncing off the lower curve of the wave right here. Step back again. All right. Looking pretty good. Also, to make your foam, not the foam, but the glistening light stand out even more, watch what I'm doing. Little dots of non-light, little dots of shadow with some deep violets and magenta here. Just these little contrasting dots I'm putting into the little spaces where some of the undercoating is still showing. The little dots of the darker shadows really make the light stand out more. Reflections in front of the wave, darkness there, darker reflection right in front of it. Darkness here, darker reflections right in front of it. Okay. To give it a little more life here, I'm just putting a little of this turquoise, sort of aqua green in the water here. A little bit of violet in there as well, purple. So this part is all in shadow here, so I'm using some darker tones to make it look cool and shadowy out of the sunlight. Same thing with the next wave coming in darker against the light of the shimmering light on the water. Okay, let me step back. I think we're almost done. Way off in the distance on the island here, there's actually greenery, trees that are starting to come back. And so I'm putting just a tiny bit of pale green into this, give it a little bit more interest. Same thing's going on over here too a little bit. Certain times of year, enough rain falls on this rocky molokini here that it actually gets some beautiful green growing on there. Now while my paintbrush has very little green left in it, I'm going to lay just a little bit of that color in here. But nothing as bright as what I'm doing in here and on the closer island of Molokini. Okay, I'm going to sign it, and I may go back and do a little more touch-up, and I'll show that at the very end. So I'm going to put my signature over here. Jim. Free. Freeheart. And my little symbol here, that means celebrate the gift of life. Great. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and please subscribe to my channel if you did, and we'll see what we can do with some additional land and seascape tutorial paintings. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.